the the best way of summarizing um, my life experience, it's been, I had a experience when I was 21, 22, which was a long time ago, in which there was, it was a transformative thing where all of a sudden I experienced that I was connected to everything. And it was a profound connection. I didn't even know such a thing existed. There wasn't a me and it, or a me and the tree, or a me and others. It was just, it was all connected. I was all of that. It lasted for about 3 days. And it was pure. I understood, oh, this is what life is about, to feel this connection to everything. Very peaceful, very joyful. And then after 3 days, I came out of it. I came back to normal reality, and excruciatingly painful. Like, how to get back here. I didn't even know that existed. And then all of a sudden, didn't even know you could fall out of it once you were in it, whatever. I didn't even know what it was. And it was back, it was actually back in the early 70s. So there was not a context for this. So I've spent the rest of my life since then sorting out, well, what is that place of stillness or connection? How do we enter and sustain that experience? How does it work? Which is really another way of saying, well, how does life work? And so I've been a student of that. But from the very beginning, actually, since then, I was, for whatever reason, I was more interested in how do we create social environments really of connection that support us in finding that connection individually. And I've been aware for a long, I mean, even in growing up when I was a kid, I was always seemingly aware of the other, of the school. I remember being in junior high school, and the first day I walked into this very large school from a small elementary school. I walked into this school with about 1,000 kids, and it was overwhelming because it felt like I could feel the whole school at once. The principals, the teachers, the students. And I didn't even know what that was. But it was just kind of being empathetic, which is what most people who are opening to connection or self-awareness more and more, we kind of come with this being able to feel other, and that sensitivity itself is a guiding force of life. So I was interested, how do we create social resonance? But it's not just so that we all get along together, but how do we create social resonance so that we encourage people outside of whatever that social resonant group is that we're in? How do we create that kind of connection when we're by ourselves, or when we're with our family, or when we're struggling with some issue, or when we're at work? So I've been a deep student of what I call transformational group dynamics. If we walk into any room of where there's people, is that we can walk in the room and we can go, oh, this room feels good. And not the room itself, but the people in it are creating a frequency that any one of us would be able to say, this feels really good. And we walk into another room and this feels, wow, I want to get out of here. It's not safe, or it doesn't feel like there's much connection between people. So we all have this capacity to feel that kind of resonance or social resonance within any group. Or honest, we can be walking down a street, and some neighborhoods have it and some don't. You walk into a business, like I have a bank that I go to, and they've made a point, a corporate decision, that they're going to be the friendliest bank in the world. And I walk in, they know my name. Hi, how are you? Everyone's friendly. And they build it into their culture to create social resonance. So and some people will feel comfortable in one group and not in another. But in general, we all have the same sensitivity towards how much connection or love or kindness is in this room, and how much tension and apprehension and fear and unresolved conflict is in the room. So um, my work has been, how can we create, um, what are the principles or the mechanisms that allow us to intentionally create social environments that feel good to walk into. I discovered, well, I'll use an analogy. If there's something wrong with my car, then in order to fix the car, I can't just say, well, there's something wrong with my car and then think I'm going to fix it. I have to know, well, what's wrong with the car? Is it the ignition or the battery or whatever? What doesn't work that makes the car not work? Um, so the same thing goes with social environments. If we want to change a culture, whether it's a business culture or a culture within a partnership or marriage, or the culture with just a group of friends, or in a football stadium, soccer stadium, um, that if we're going to change that culture because it doesn't feel good and we want to change it to something that feels good, how do we, what is it that we change in order for the culture to change? You have to know specifically what it is. And what I've found that, it's agreements. It's the agreements that we have with one another essentially are what create the culture within that social organism. Most of them, when you say 90% are unspoken. So if we start off with identifying that that's true, then we can go into any social group. And because we know that that's true, that our agreements um, are what affect the nature of our culture or the resonance of our culture, then we can say, we start off, let's get clear, well, what agreements do we want to make? What kind of culture do we want to create? Anytime any group of people are together and there's the freedom to start off with being clear, what kind of, uh, what do we want our relationship to feel like? What are we here for? Um, the discussion itself brings connection. It just brings connection. That's the start. And that to me is huge. But then that's just the start. And what I've found, I've been doing circle work, and my particular work is called, I call it heart circle. But what I've found in kind of being in men's groups and marriage groups and all kinds of groups, businesses, religious groups, all these things, I was interested in, um, okay, inside of that group, what agreements do we make besides let's be looking at what kind of environment we want to create by being together? That's starting off with being clear. And what I found was there are these 5 basic um, inquiries, or there's 5 aspects of life that it doesn't matter who we are, what country we're in, what class, gender, it doesn't matter about any of that. We all have these 5 basic challenges or things that we get to investigate about life. And I found that these 5 elements that each one of us individually get to investigate in life in order to have life work more smoothly or successfully or more connection, really, that those same basic elements apply to a group. And so, very as succinctly as possible, particularly now where there's so much drama and tension externally, given the nature of the pandemic that we're in, the global economic situation that's fragile, given the penchant towards authoritarianism and extremes on both sides. We still have nuclear issues. And then we've got climate change, which is the grandmother of it all. So we have to be able to know how to move through all of this tension, and not only individually, which these 5 elements are just, they're a map for me that I enjoy. It's basically how I navigate my life. There's no technique in it. I have to sort out technique. Why I enjoy or find great value in these, what I call 5 ways of being, is that they can be addressed or spoken to at any level of where any individual is. I work with some corporations in which we can't use some of the language here, but because these 5 ways of being are so elemental, when we talk, for example, about presence, we can simply talk about where we're just not so stressed. How do we come out of stress? And when we talk about being real, how can we create a work environment where there's not a hierarchical only way of organizing, where you don't need to connect with people if you have authority to fire them. You can order them around, but those kinds of organizations don't function as creatively as the ones where there's still hierarchy, but it isn't what runs the company. It's people actually caring for one another and appreciating and supporting each other. We've got to be able to create an environment where people feel they can relax and not be constantly moving forward, constantly thinking about the next problem to solve, because it doesn't support real creative problem solving. So the question of, by creating a social environment where we're looking at what kind of atmosphere do we want to create together, that question will allow a person to speak from the frequency that they live in. And someone else can speak to the frequency they live in, but because they're answering the same question, oftentimes it supersedes belief and opinions. I don't encourage people to make an agreements that they're going to be kind and caring, or they're going to be more real with each other. It's all introduced is this something that you want to explore together? Do you want to be more kind and caring? Not, are you going to be kind and caring? There's plenty of room not to be kind and caring. But because we've made it our intention to do so, we have a framework from which to create a culture where there's greater connection. I'm really, really interested in speaking to the difficulty of this, the difficulty of creating social resonance, the difficulty of people finding the eye of the storm. Instead of my focus, oh, if you take these 5 ways of being, it makes things so much easier. It doesn't. It doesn't. It only provides a map that allows us to know what it is that, what options that we have. If you're going over a waterfall, it can be a pretty tough thing, tumble all down a waterfall. What's 100 times harder is going over a waterfall when you think that you're in a calm pool of water. It's the confusion of not knowing, the difficulty of being caught in a waterfall when you think you're in a swimming pool. That's confusing. So if we know we're going over a waterfall, if we know that to establish social connection and individually for me to practice being clear, present, real, connected, and creative or heart directed at any time. So many of teachings will say, well, if you do this and this, it will be easy, or you'll reach this place of clarity and you really will be clear, present, real, connected, and heart directed. No, you won't. It's so much more complex. It takes us into much more nuance. The more clear we are and present, the more pain we feel. Like I was driving through some forests. I live in the United States, and where these fires were, these forests that we camp in, we drive through, they're decimated with fire. And to not feel the nausea of thousands and thousands of a million acres here, a million acres, just charcoal sticks sticking out of the mountains. To try to be in relationship, in partnerships that work when all of these pressures are going on, economic pressures, COVID. It's I call it like meditation on an anthill. It's good to know how to meditate to get still, but you also have to know if you're sitting on an anthill, it's a good idea to get off really soon if they're red ants. It's not like if we learn this, it's then easy. No, if we learn this, then we understand the difficulty of it. And in the feeling the difficulty of creating social resonance, creating an inner tranquility so that we can meet the times, these 5 elements I find are a good map for me. How do I stay clear? What am I doing here? Be present, real, connected, and what do I want next from my heart or from true guidance, inner guidance, intuitive guidance. And then the really big thing is, how do we together create this kind of ability to move through difficult times and stay in the eye of the hurricane? And it turns out we get to make these same 5 agreements that we want to use being together as a way to practice being clear together about why we're together and about how we can be more present together when we're together, and how you and I, anybody else, we can be more honest and real with each other in our, what are we feeling? And then be more connected. We're going to be coming into so many pressurized situations in our daily life where we'll have this choice with others to be clear, present, real, and heart directed, or not. And I think more and more collectively, because the crisis, these crises that we're in are going to be more and more pronounced and numerous. It's a collective opportunity for us to come to a choice point. Are we going to act individually and kind of only deal with our own selves, or are we going to experience this connection? I think that life is going to more and more bring us to ways where we're going to be able to share this. And the 5 ways of being, to me, kind of point towards the complexity of this. In some ways, love isn't enough, even though there was love there. It's also the decision to deal with one's own fear. And that is, how connected do I feel to the rest of life? I'm not just a separate energy that lives and dies. There's something bigger going on.